Chapter 29, Faded Sunset. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. October 10, 2016. Chapter 29, Faded Sunset. As my body slumped to the ground, blood trickling out from beneath, Ganondorf continued to laugh at what he had done. The trident that he held in his hand had my blood on the tip, and as it trickled down, he ran his finger along the tip before flicking the blood away. Calling him sadistic at this point was an understatement, yet he held a strong sense of satisfaction over what he had done. This wasn't the first time Ganondorf had killed someone, far from it, but I'd say it was his most satisfying kill considering how I was able to ruffle his composure by defying him. Her Highness was still in shock that I had been killed, but that was when she noticed something about Ganondorf. He had since covered up his chest with his cape, yet the darkened section indicated that he had sustained more than just a wounded sense of pride. The thought of losing me was enough to make her rush forward in hopes of making him pay for what he had done, but her efforts were in vain. She was a fairy in this world and not a pony, princess who possessed incredible magical powers. There was nothing she could have done against Ganondorf, and he was about to remind her of that frailty. The moment she got close to him, Her Highness was stopped by a powerful force that began to crush her on all sides. As she looked on, she could see that Ganondorf was struggling a little to maintain focus, yet he tried desperately to make it appear that nothing was wrong. Eventually, he relinquished his hold over her, his cape flapping to the side, revealing a gaping hole in the middle of his chest, blood gushing forth, his armor cracked around the epicenter around the wound. I had somehow performed the impossible and inflicted a severe wound on Ganondorf, not enough to kill him, but enough to show that not even he was invincible. On the other hand, he was laughing before he chose to hide his wound. Perhaps what Her Highness was seeing was his attempt at trying to deceive her into thinking that he had suffered such a wound. In her eyes, however, all she could see was my lifeless corpse sprawled across the ground. The magic that had surrounded me faded away until my body changed back to normal from being Daydream Shimmer. Despite having ponied up on numerous occasions, I could maintain my ears and tail for as long as I needed to. Retaining such a beautiful form as I had become during the friendship games was much more difficult. Was it because it was a form I had never achieved before until that moment? Did my body struggle to contain all the magic I had absorbed? Those weren't the only questions I had on my mind as my life continued to slip away. Had I reached the pinnacle of what I could do with magic? Had I achieved a form that the rest of my friends would never be able to achieve due to not having the same magical experience? Or, was this merely the beginning? Would I evolve even further than I had? It was a thought that had no immediate answer, yet perhaps it would come to me sometime in the future. Her Highness attempted to charge at Ganondorf again. Why she would do this again was beyond me given it didn't work before, but she stopped of her own accord when he turned his attention towards her. The hatred in his eyes glowed vehemently. It was that kind of fear he had been using to torment me in my dreams, yet now he was doing it to her because it was what gave him some additional power, the power of fear.
The child has proven herself much stronger than I had initially expected,
Ganondorf said.
I can't believe you would say that,
Twilight shouted.
It seems that you still wallow in despair over the fact that the only one closest to you in this world has breathed her last,
Ganondorf said as he slowly got to his feet.
Do you really think you can do something against me? You may possess a powerful magic far beyond most, yet it cannot be used here in this place. All you are merely doing is begging me to end your wretched existence.
Twilight was flustered.
Why? Why did you do this to Sunset?
Ganondorf answered.
I wanted to test her strength once again, to see if she had gotten stronger since our last contest. Is that all you care about? Power? Those who dedicate themselves to power only end up destroying themselves by being consumed by it. You may think that you can control such power through those boasts of yours, but even you struggle to keep yourself in check,
Twilight said. She floated closer to Ganondorf, making sure not to get too close.
I noticed you lost control of your emotions when Sunset chose to defy you. For someone who claims to be all-powerful, that's certainly a glaring weakness to have. You would be wise to choose your words more carefully, Princess. Oh? And what are you going to do about it? Kill me? Knowing you, that's probably what you would end up doing. I actually thought you could be reasoned with despite having a heart caked in so much darkness. I thought you and Sunset could have avoided all this by refusing to fight, yet you insisted on fighting her just to prove something pointless. Power isn't everything, Ganondorf,
Twilight announced. The moment she said that, the Dark Lord reared his head and lurched forward.
Having power means nothing if you can't have someone to share it with, or better yet, not having it at all.
His response to her words was an immediate laughter that echoed throughout the room. It was at that point where Her Highness realized that she was merely wasting her breath trying to convince him that the pursuit of absolute power was wrong. He was far too gone to save, given he had been gaining power over the course of many centuries. At the very least, she tried her best in a vain hope he would listen. Ganondorf then began walking forward, blood dripping on the floor with every step he took, yet it didn't appear to faze him. Perhaps his wound wasn't as severe as it originally seemed? He continued walking until he stopped right in front of my body and raised his trident above his head. Her Highness believed he was about to drive it down into my body as further insult to the fact that he killed me, and she attempted to flutter about in hopes of distracting him. Again, her effort was in vain as she found herself being frozen on the spot by a more powerful force than before. Ganondorf's power was slowly growing, and that meant his wound was no longer weakening him. The trident came crashing down to the ground, inches away from my head, and he left it there for a few moments before picking it up again using dark magic. Twilight was confused as to why he put on such a display. Ganondorf's trident began to hover in the air through his magic to demonstrate that his power was still absolute, but when it disappeared into black smoke a few moments later, he clenched his hand into a fist, looked down at my body, and huffed before stepping back a few paces. He continued to stare down at my body as though he were waiting for something to happen, and that's when he began laughing again, kicking his head back in the process.
I find this most amusing.
Her Highness wasn't amused in the slightest.
You've got a lot of nerve, laughing at Sunset's lifeless corpse. That nattering of yours, Princess, tells me that you still haven't figured it out yet, have you?
Ganondorf asked. Twilight's immediate response to his question was a quick shake of her head before lowering it down slightly.
No, I didn't think it would make sense to one who has no knowledge of the Triforce.
He thrust out his clenched fist and a bright glow suddenly appeared on the back of his hand before a similar one started glowing on my hand. Her Highness looked on in surprise as she didn't know what was happening.
The Triforce is a power that can produce great miracles, such as being able to cheat death. What are you saying?
Ganondorf laughed quietly.
The child still lives. Sunset is still alive? But, how? My wound through her body did indeed kill her, but the Triforce of courage that dwells inside of her body has reacted to her heart. It senses that she must continue in her efforts to save not only those she cares for, but for 2 worlds that she calls home.
Ganondorf answered.
The Triforce can perform a miracle like that. Heh. There is much about the golden power that eludes both you and the child, Princess. She believed that it was over when she restored her world, yet she never once told you or the rest of her friends that she still possessed the Triforce of courage. Once a piece has chosen someone to bear it, they can never be rid of it. They are forever bound to the others who possess the remaining pieces. Unless they are killed.
Ganondorf answered.
You wanted to kill Sunset so that you could claim her piece. Ha!
Ganondorf answered, his fist revealing his mark had 3 glowing pieces as opposed to my 1.
Where I am from, the complete Triforce became mine when I slaughtered all those who tried to prevent me from achieving my destiny. But, if you have the complete Triforce, why does Sunset have a piece now? It is a question that she will discover when the time comes, and perhaps you shall find out the same answer.
Ganondorf answered. At that moment, I let out a quiet groan and slowly began to move my arms and legs without even realizing it.
The child is the one who can indulge that curiosity, Princess, but I would not assume that she alone must suffer. If you have not yet figured out why you are here, then perhaps you are not as intelligent as others have claimed. I don't understand. Fate hasn't just come down upon the child.
Ganondorf. My body continued to wriggle about as I struggled to regain consciousness, and upon seeing me flailing about, Her Highness floated beside my head to give me some much-needed comfort. It was as though her very presence, combined with an inner magic residing inside her body, was enough to make me open my eyes. The first thing I did upon waking up was coughing up some blood that had gotten stuck in my throat. My next course of action was to try and get back onto my feet, yet that proved difficult given that the wound Ganondorf inflicted on me was still making me writhe with pain. At the very least I had stopped bleeding. I looked down at the gaping hole in my stomach before noticing a similar hole that Ganondorf had in his chest, but unlike mine his didn't look anywhere near as bad. In theory, I should be wallowing about in what many have referred to as the afterlife, yet here I was alive with a hole that went right through me. How had I come back to life? I didn't collect any fairies along the way before coming to the temple, although on hindsight I should remember to pick some up, so what cost it? Looking at my hands followed by my body, that was when I noticed that my magic had weakened and I was no longer Daydream Shimmer. Not that I was bothered by it all that much. In truth, I was relieved that I was no longer in that powerful form. While I enjoyed becoming so beautiful and possessing magic that came from all of my friends, I didn't want to lose control given how much power flows through me. Before I even had a chance to figure out what was going on, I felt a tiny push against my cheek prompting me to look down. Twilight was squeezing my cheek as hard as she could with as much force as her tiny body could muster. The feeling felt mutual to me, so I responded by closing my eyes, smiling, and tilting my head. No doubt I had worried her immensely over what had just transpired, yet that was when Her Highness broke the silence by saying something.
Sunset. I thought you were dead. Wasn't I?
I asked, confused.
You were, but the Triforce you possess brought you back to life. You're kidding.
I exclaimed, looking down at my hand and seeing the mark of the Triforce glowing.
This thing saved me, hey? I know that my spirit left my body for a few moments after I collapsed to the ground, but I felt some divine power pulling me back into my body, a voice telling me that I wasn't meant to die right now. I'm just relieved that you're alive. Me too, but I still don't understand why it happened. It is because the Triforce of Courage willed you back to life through divine intervention.
Ganondorf said. That's when everything started coming back into focus, and I looked onward at the man who had briefly ended my life moments ago.
I am not surprised that you have cheated death, child, but then the Triforce of Courage had chosen you to wield it because you represent that force. I knew that you would not die, but it didn't stop me from enjoying myself. You knew Sunset would live?
Twilight asked.
Of course he knew, Twilight. Ganondorf can foresee everything before it even happens.
I answered.
What has happened here is that you have now embraced the power that lies inside of you even if it escapes your understanding. That alone is what makes you worthy of my attention, worthy of casting aside your pathetic existence in favor of being one with the power and becoming my faithful servant. If you had not kept the Triforce of Courage after restoring everything back to the way it was, I would have killed you there and then instead of allowing you to live.
Ganondorf said.
Is that why you want me to suffer?
Ganondorf laughed.
Think of it as a small bonus for me.
I shouted back.
You're sick and twisted. It is because of the changes that you have experienced in your life that has made you a threat to my dominion, child.
Ganondorf said. His words suddenly shocked me. Was that the real reason he had been making me suffer from the very beginning? Had my change over the past year at Canterlot High resonated with him in some way? If so, then why go after a pony, turned human? I needed to know more about this.
I see you finally figured out an important answer. Why me? When you became a demon, you gained power that almost rivaled my own, thus getting my attention. Then you changed and started gaining new power courtesy of the light. That power blossomed further through the bonds that bind you and your friends together.
Ganondorf answered. The truth had finally been made known to me, yet there was still much that didn't make sense. I was once a gifted unicorn who had so much potential who squandered that opportunity, but maybe that wasn't what drew his attention towards me. What else could there have been that would attract him? That's when it started to become clear. He mentioned the form I became during the fall formal, the form that I felt was my biggest ever mistake in life. It was what happened after I was defeated by Her Highness and my friends. I had gained not only new magical abilities such as my ability to pony up, but also my ability to combine my friend's magic together with my own and become Daydream Shimmer. Something didn't seem right about all of this. What happened during the friendship games occurred after the ordeal that was my journey across Hyrule in that video game. My new transformation had become a threat to him and he was determined to bring me under his influence because of the magic I acquire. It made sense since he'd rather have power under his control than against him. My increasing magic courtesy of what I brought into the world that I called home was the sole reason why he was targeting me. My friends were gaining new magic at around the same pace, but because of my experiences, my magic was secretly more powerful than theirs.
So you see me as a threat? You are a unicorn whose magic is far beyond your years, yet you are a mewling compared to the likes of my power.
Ganondorf answered.
I have lived over 2 millennia and seen things the likes of which are beyond your mind. Your magic is a small spark that cannot be held up to mine. Perhaps you would have the same satisfaction were you to have lived for as long as I have. Doesn't change the fact that I'm a threat. Heh. You may think all you like, child, but know that you will never truly escape my grasp.
Ganondorf said. The fact that he changed the subject indicated that I had gotten under his skin, yet he was refraining from losing control like he did before. Was he trying to hold back his emotions? Perhaps he wasn't as intimidating as I originally thought.
You have lived up to my expectations of you, Sunset Shimmer, yet you can go even further than you already have.
I knew where he was going with those words and I wasn't about to put up with it.
I don't want to go further. You have no choice in the matter. No matter what you say, Ganondorf, I'll never become your servant. It is only a matter of time before you bend your knee to me and become my faithful servant whose power shall be nurtured under my guidance. So long as you possess a piece of the golden power within you, you and I are forever bound together by fate.
Ganondorf said.
Why do I even have it?
I asked.
Shouldn't it have left me when I finished that game? The Triforce of Courage chose you as you exhibited courage in the face of adversity. It seems you needed courage to get you through the dark days after you lost the power you claimed by using what once belonged to the princess. You questioned everything because deep down you feared that the others would despise your very existence. It was all a mere coincidence that the power chose to remain with you instead of separating.
Ganondorf answered. There was nothing I could say in response to his words. Ever since I returned from Hyrule, I made absolute certain that none of my friends nor anyone else at Canterlot High knew about the power that remained inside of me. I feared they wouldn't understand, considering they'd never believe what had happened to our world. For a while, the mark never appeared and I thought no less about it, but when it began glowing a couple of days before the get-together between Canterlot High and Crystal Prep, I should have realized it was a sign that things were about to get much worse for me. Maybe I should have said something instead of keeping it to myself. Had I done that, perhaps all of my friends would be in this situation and not just myself and Her Highness. Speaking of her, I felt guilty over not entirely being honest about what happened when the world I call home was transformed into a world from a game. I knew she wasn't upset as she herself had kept secrets out of fear that no one could understand, yet perhaps she was disappointed all the same. At the same time, I should have taken those nightmares more seriously. They weren't just about making me suffer, but were also a warning that things were going to get much worse. All of a sudden, I noticed Ganondorf had turned his back to me and began to walk away.
Where are you going? I am done with you, child. You don't want to kill me again. Ha! There is no point considering the Triforce of Courage protects you.
Ganondorf answered. I breathed heavily over what he said, but then he suddenly turned around and looked at me with a sharp gaze.
Do not feel so complacent, child. The golden power only protects you when you are in Hyrule and that you have proven that you represent the power it conveys from Faroe 1. In the world that you shall be sent back to, it does not exist there.
That alone caused my heart to start beating heavily and Ganondorf responded by laughing.
You thought the power would prevent the torment that awaits you? You can never escape from what has been fated to happen.
Turning around again, Ganondorf took a single step forward before stopping again.
Child. You shall face me once again when you have become even stronger, but it will not be in a place like this nor will it be in the world that hangs on the edge of destruction. I can foresee the great magic that awaits you upon acquiring something that has significance with a mark you were stained with at a much younger age.
His words confused me.
What does that mean? When next we meet, it shall be within your very mind. I have seen your physical strength, child, yet your mental powers are something that I have yet to witness. So long as the Triforce of Courage is in your hands, there is nowhere that you can escape from me. Never forget my words, child. I shall always be watching from the shadows, waiting for the time when I shall test your mental prowess. I shall haunt your subconscious to remind you that you and I bound together by fate.
Ganondorf answered. He walked forward until he disappeared into the shadows, but the echo of his words continued to be felt.
Your other is also bound to the same fate. Now. Begone.
Everything suddenly went white as it had done before and the next thing I knew, I was back in the Snowhead Mountains, more specifically the mountain village. The first thing I did upon regaining consciousness was to see if the wound Ganondorf had inflicted on me had either healed up or was still there. To my relief, there was no wound. With that problem solved, I got back up onto my feet and began looking around to discover an amazing sight. The snow had been melting all across the area, though some still remained, but why had it melted so quickly? By my recollection, my encounter with the Dark Lord had lasted roughly an hour or two. Then again, he brought me to a place that was outside the boundaries of Termina. As such, time hadn't moved on since I defeated Goat, and that's when an idea came to me. The snow was a curse and God was the source behind it, but with its defeat by my hands, Snowhead had turned back to the way it was before. Sadly, it was a hollow victory at best. I had saved all of Snowhead from succumbing to a frozen death, yet things would revert back to the they were with Goat once I reset time. Once again, my efforts had proven to be in vain, but at least I could gain some satisfaction knowing that I was able to finish off what Maud started. I'll also admit that Snowhead is much more pleasant during the spring as opposed to winter. Despite knowing that this wasn't going to last forever, I had to decide what to do with the remaining time I had, but before I could think of anything, a familiar bopping on my head ensued.
"We're back in Termina,"
Twilight said.
"I know. Right. You and I are going to have a long conversation, Sunset." "Yeah. I know. There's some things you've been keeping from me, and they have to do with that strange mark that appeared on the back of your hand. But we don't need to deal with it right now because we have other objectives to take care of,"
Twilight said.
"First, you need to return the stray fairies to their fountain. After that, we should check up on the Gorons to see if things have improved for them now that the snow has melted. Besides, we need to speak with them regarding how to get some gold dust for fancy pants. You do want a better sword, right?" "Yes. We must see the Gorons. I'm sure they'll be happy to see Maud."
Her Highness noticed my sudden exhaustion.
"Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Why do you ask? You look like you're about to collapse from exhaustion." "I guess maybe fighting Ganondorf made me use up all my strength,"
I said. I suddenly dropped to my knees before falling flat on my stomach and fell asleep. I had also spent much of my strength rolling around in my efforts to defeat Goat in addition to Ganondorf, so my body had been drained and needed plenty of rest. Unfortunately, I chose a pretty lousy time to want to take a nap. Her Highness attempted to wake me up, but there was nothing she could do. My body had completely shut down and refused to budge even an inch. It looked like I would be vulnerable to any creatures that prowled about at night, yet someone had noticed me collapsing and decided to investigate to see if they could help. Twilight attempted to protect me from whoever had come over, but her efforts sadly amounted to nothing. Whoever it was had picked me up before turning around and was about to start heading back when they nodded at Her Highness. She smiled slightly because she recognized who it was that had come to investigate, but she was still concerned because of previous experiences. However, she knew that this wasn't Equestria, so my would-be rescuer wasn't the same person who almost brought about the destruction of the land of my birth. Without saying another word, Her Highness followed along behind who had found me as they took me back to wherever it was they came from.
"Ah, shoot. I can't believe none of my tactics are working on whatever y'all are supposed to be,"
Applejack said. She was holding a broken pitchfork in her hand and surrounding her feet were the remnants of other farm tools she had been using in an attempt to drive away the demonic creatures who had been plaguing Romani Ranch.
"You monsters might have gotten our cattle, but there ain't no way I'm gonna let you take my little sister away. You do realize that you have no hope of surviving, right?"
the tall figure asked.
"That don't mean anything, Tommy. So long as Romani remains safe inside the house, y'all can do whatever you want to me."
The tall figure took that as a challenge and rubbed her hands with glee.
"Even in this world, you still have to possess that annoying attitude that bugged me to no end." "What are y'all even talking about?"
Applejack asked.
"I don't even know what in the hay you and your companion are supposed to be. All I know is that you two must have been responsible for what happened to our cattle and to my sister, and nothing you say will convince me otherwise."
She tossed away the broken pitchfork and tried to grab something else to use as a weapon, but to her dismay, she discovered that there wasn't anything left inside the house that could be used to protect her sister. Upon realizing that the rest of the farm tools were still inside the barn, she cursed under her breath knowing she didn't bring them back, but then she didn't know that she would be fighting for her life against two demonic creatures. The tall figure, who had done most of the damage by breaking Applejack's equipment, had grown annoyed over having to deal with someone she saw as beneath her. The small figure, on the other hand, was content to just writing stuff down on her notepad, yet occasionally told her companion that she needed to show a bit of restraint. The situation continued to worsen for Applejack as it apparent that she had nothing left to use aside from her own fists, but even she knew these creatures wouldn't be intimidated let alone affected by punches. Her only option was to run back inside, close the door, and bolt it up in hopes it would be enough to keep them from getting inside. As the final lock on the door was put into place, the tall figure walked forward, hands on her hips before grabbing the door by the hinges, ripping it off, and tossing it aside where it smashed to pieces a fair distance away.
"You actually thought a door would stop me? That was my last-ditch effort." I'll give you credit for keeping me busy for the last 20 minutes, but I've grown tired of being sideshowed by some country bumpkin. If my companion hadn't shown me the value of being patient, I'd have ripped you to shreds before doing the same thing to your little sister.
The tall figure said.
Do what you want with me, but please spare Romani. I'm going to enjoy this immensely, Applejack. Despite being within the corners of her mind until she transformed into me, I observed you and the others struggling because of how she manipulated all of you through deception. I just couldn't stand seeing your face because you always thought of yourself as being the best thing ever. It was your mannerisms, country accent, and overall personality that bugged me to no end.
The tall figure said.
Why are y'all taking your aggression out on me?
Applejack asked, stepping backwards in hopes of being able to reach the staircase.
I don't know who this Applejack even is, but it sounds like you've got a mighty big problem just because she annoyed you without even realizing it. Whatever your problem is with her, just leave me and my sister out of it.
She moved even closer towards the stairs, but the tall figure grabbed her and pulled her outside of the house onto the ground. The tall figure loomed over Applejack.
I just needed to vent a little bit. What in the hay is your problem?
Applejack asked.
If y'all are that annoyed with this Applejack person, then you should talk to them boutstead of tryin' to pick a fight with someone ya don't even know. She makes a valid point.
The small figure said.
And have you forgotten what happened when everything changed? What are you getting at?
The tall figure asked.
Even though this woman is Applejack, she doesn't know that because of how that man changed their world into this one. As far as she knows, she is the proprietor of this fine establishment and doesn't want any more problems.
The small figure answered. Applejack got back onto her feet and rubbed her back.
Like I said, if y'all have got a problem with this Applejack, then talk it out with them stead of relying on physical force just because you're stronger than most. I'm tellin' ya ta honest truth and ya should consider my words careful like.
At that moment, she began to glow in an orange light that blinded the two demons, but then it quickly faded away as fast as it had appeared. The tall figure rubbed her eyes due to the light blinding her.
What was that? I think it was her element.
The small figure answered.
How could she have gotten that? I thought you said she was a different person now. It seems that's only partially true.
The small figure answered. She quickly combed over some notes she had written down before addressing her companion again.
Their personalities have definitely been changed to reflect upon what has happened to their world, but the equestrian magic they possess didn't make the transition. What does that mean?
The small figure coughed.
It means their magic is struggling to breach the reality of this world. If that's true,
the tall figure began.
Then she isn't the only one going through what we just witnessed. A definite possibility. What are y'all both talking about? I ain't got no idea why I suddenly glowed like I did, but it don't change the fact that you two have ruined the ranch that my father worked so hard to turn into a prosperous place.
Applejack said. She walked into the house and this time the tall figure didn't pursue her.
If you know what's good for you, you'll leave this ranch and go somewhere else. I know my words might be viewed as threatening, but I just want to be left alone right now. We shall comply.
The tall figure gasped.
What? You want us to leave? We have what we came here for.
The small figure answered.
Besides, Applejack here has suffered plenty already, and while it would be delightful to add insult to injury, we should further confirm our suspicions by seeking out another one of her friends.
Applejack shouted.
I ain't this Applejack. You are, but you don't exactly know it because of ramifications beyond your control. I'd go into more details but it would just go over your head, and I'd be wasting my time, which is something I dislike. Besides, none of this is going to matter anyway. Y'all are referring to the moon?
Applejack asked, looking up at the night sky.
Something similar to that, but again it's beyond your realm of understanding. Anyway, we shall leave to wallow in the misery of what has transpired here over the course of these past 2 nights. If I were you, I'd embrace what little remains before it becomes a forgotten memory.
The small figure answered. Turning her attention to the tall figure, she nodded but once and her companion sighed before they both took to the sky. As the 2 demonic figures disappeared into the night sky, 2 trails of magic flowing about behind them in the cool breeze, Applejack walked up the stairs and entered the bedroom where Apple Bloom had been sleeping the entire time.
Creamia? Are you all right?
Applejack answered.
No grog. I ain't. What was with those 2 creatures? I don't know, and I reckon I don't wanna know. At least everyone's safe. Until the moon falls.
Applejack said.
When that happens, everyone across the whole of Terminal will die.
As she looked down upon her little sister sleeping peacefully despite what happened, tears started trickling down Applejack's face. She then dropped to her knees, buried her head into the bedsheets, and quietly wept until she fell asleep. Grog walked over to a nearby chair, sat down, and slowly drifted off to sleep himself. I had no idea where I was right now given that I collapsed outside in the mountain village. My brain was trying to tell me to wake up before I could get into even more trouble, yet my heart felt content about resting up for as long as necessary. Within my dreams, I could see a visage of home. Not the home that has been part of my life for the last few years, but rather the home that I abandoned because of believing I was destined for more than what was meant to be passed down onto me. It was Equestria. The land I was born in. Part of me still longed for the day when I could gallop about on 4 hooves, fling about magic like it was nothing, eat equestrian foods instead of the kind humans gorge themselves over, and generally embrace my true self as a pony. There was still the lingering doubt that plagued my mind. In the very corner of my subconscious stood a familiar figure who looked sad, a figure I knew just as well as Princess Twilight herself did. I knew she wanted to see me again after so long, hence why she appeared as crying, but I still believed I wasn't ready to be in her presence. After what I said and did when we had our falling out, I felt unworthy to even bask in her presence, let alone be in the same world. Her Highness continued to reassure me that nothing bad would happen to me should I choose to go back through the portal, yet she had it easy compared to me. She didn't almost bring about the destruction of Equestria by stealing one of the most important artifacts the kingdom had ever known. Not a day goes by that I still felt tremendous guilt for resorting to petty thievery. Princess Twilight again insists that I wouldn't be punished for what happened, but I believed otherwise. I just knew some pony in Equestria wanted me banished to the desolate wastes. Sure, it was what I thought was true and might sound ridiculous to others, but I knew that my actions were wrong, especially betraying my former teacher by reading up on forbidden magic in the Canterlot Library. Would I truly be forgiven by Equestria and not just by those who knew me on a personal level? It was an answer I didn't know. My subconscious suddenly turned black, the image of Equestria faded away, and it was due to my heart finally getting the hint from my brain that I was to wake up. How much time had passed since collapsing from exhaustion after 2 grueling encounters? That answer would be made clear in mere moments. The instant my eyes opened, I was greeted by the face of someone familiar.
Hugo. 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 Wah!
I screamed, jumping several feet into the air. I landed hard on my butt, rubbed it a little, and looked over at Fancy Pants, who was chuckling away at my misfortune.
I am sorry that you were scared by Majora. He usually frightens people a lot worse than that, usually just by staring at them. Where am I? Back at our place.
Fancy Pants answered.
Majora went outside briefly to fetch some wood for the hearth, noticed you were lying close by, picked you up, and brought you here where you've been sleeping in that corner for almost 8 hours.
I rubbed my eyes to get better acquainted to the light.
Now I remember. I collapsed from exhaustion. I don't know what you did to get that tuckered out, but be glad that Majora found you instead of one of those hungry beasts that roam the mountains at night. If one of them had found you, we'd be preparing a burial and your friend would have suffered a mental breakdown.
Fancy Pants said. I turned to see Her Highness floating in front of me, tears trickling down her cheeks.
Twilight. I'm so sorry for making you worry. It's okay, Sunset.
Twilight said.
I'm just that you pulled through, although for a moment I thought you would never wake up. How long was I out for? About 8 hours. That means dawn will come in about 4 hours. Yes. Hugo. Hugo.
Tyrek said.
I should thank you, shouldn't I, for helping me out?
I said, smiling.
Hugo, oh, Hugo, Hugo. I still don't understand what you're saying, but I think you just thanked me for the compliment. Hugo.
Fancy Pants then interrupted when he pointed his finger at the window.
Have you seen the weather outside, kid? The snow suddenly melted away in a matter of seconds like something had breathed a burst of spring air all across the mountains. It looks absolutely wonderful, I tell you. Does that mean the Gorons are safe? Most likely.
Fancy Pants answered.
I'm sure they'll have that patriarch race that I told you about before. I need to participate in that race. Unless you happen to be a Goron, you've got no chance of joining something that means a lot to them.
Fancy Pants said.
In fact, the only thing they'd let you do is watch from the sidelines and maybe bet on someone to win.
What Fancy Pants didn't know was that I could become a Goron by putting on my mask, so me not being able to race was a non-factor. There was a problem with competing, and that was the fact that I had no experience with such a race. If it involved rolling around at high speeds, I would easily be trounced by the competition in no time. I mean, I was pretty confident about my rolling, and my battle against Goat did provide me with a rough idea as to how the Patriarch race worked, yet Goat wasn't an assortment of Gorons. There was one thing that I was certain of. Regardless of whether or not I participated in the race, winning the prize of gold dust meant nothing when it came to what I had intended on using it for. I needed it to reforge my razor sword, but the chances of that happening were growing dimmer with every passing moment. By the time I won the prize, assuming of course that I won, and came back with the gold dust for Fancy Pants' entire rack, the final day would be upon us. Since it took until the following day to reforge my sword according to what they told me, there wouldn't be a morning to look forward to. My only recourse was to inquire about it just to be certain.
About reforging my sword again? As I mentioned to you before, if you can get some gold dust, I can make you the strongest sword imaginable. About that, I'm not sure I'll be able to get some to you before morning. Is there a problem?
I looked down at the floor sheepishly before looking back up at him.
I really do want to have an even more powerful sword, but I'm most likely to get some gold dust in the morning, so perhaps you could make an exception and work on reforging it a little faster than usual. Thing is,
Fancy Pants answered.
Tomorrow is the Carnival of Time, and I was planning on closing up shop and heading over to Clocktown along with Majora. He may be as smart as a Deku stick, but even he knows how important going there is. If we miss the celebration, we'd have to wait until next year, and I'm not doing that. If you want me to make your sword better, you need to bring me some gold dust before the sun comes up.
His words made no sense. If it took an entire day to work on making a single weapon stronger, why would he say that he could do it in less than 1/6 of the time? Was this one of those unusual quirks that this video game world possessed? If it was, then it was a glaring oversight that could easily be exploited. A shame that I couldn't exploit for myself, as then I could procure his services and get a stronger sword. Did it mean having to reset time and defeat Goat again? That was something I never considered before until now. I knew that the bosses would be revived upon time resetting, as it would be as though I never defeated them, but would it mean having to go through the temple again? If so, then perhaps it wasn't a good idea to seek out a better sword, yet the temptation was too much for me to not consider it. Either way, I would get another empty bottle if my assumption was correct. The prize for winning the Patriarch race was a bottle of gold dust, so that meant getting a new one without having to use the one I currently had. Fancy Pants turned to face me and continued talking.
I know it's inconvenient, kid, but I want to go to the carnival. I understand. Besides, I still intend on checking out the Patriarch race. You might as well do something to take your mind off of things.
Fancy Pants said.
I also heard that gold dust can be sold to some merchant who lives in Clocktown. He's a strange fellow who buys and sells exotic items. Not much else is known about him other than he only opens his shop late at night. Ugo. Ugo.
Tyrek said.
You're right for once.
Fancy Pants said.
Gabura says you should be careful when dealing with that guy because of how shady he is. If he tries to rip you off in any way, you should leave his place immediately and not face any consequences. Ugo.
Since I had nothing else to do at the mountain smithy, I thanked them for saving me from any nocturnal creatures, and began to take my leave of their place. Before I walked out of the door, Fancy Pants mentioned something else about the Gorons that he failed to mention earlier. I wasn't surprised in the least. He said that they had something that they had been working on in secret, and that he believed it would make for an excellent business opportunity. When morning comes, he would get into contact with the Gorons in hopes of working something out before leaving for the carnival. My heart felt saddened knowing that he was putting one business opportunity ahead of another, but once again time wasn't on my side. With only 20 hours left to go before having to reset time, I had to just accept the fact I had to wait for another chance to upgrade my sword. Upon walking back outside and taking in the beauty that surrounded me, I began to think about what to do next. The Patriarch race wasn't a complete loss since I could earn myself a second bottle and use it for fairies so that I don't run the risk of dying somewhere in a temple, but then Her Highness bopped me on the head to remind me that the stray fairies still needed to be taken back to their fountain. I couldn't believe that I forgot they were still inside me. It was also an opportunity to perhaps find out more about this race the Gorons partake in every year. If anyone could tell me something about it, it was a dojo. Besides, she would provide some magical assistance courtesy of a new ability. In order to get back to Snowhead Temple, I needed to go up the path that leads up to the top again, or use the Song of Soaring in order to cut out a little time. Taking out the Ocarina of Time from my pouch, I took a moment to recall how the song went. I really needed to start practicing these songs. Once I remembered how it song, I played, and within my mind, I wanted the song to take me to the owl statue that was located near where the temple was. In an instant, giant wings appeared on either side of my body, wrapped themselves around me, and spun me around several times before I disappeared. In an instant, I found myself staring up at Snowhead Temple, yet the scene had changed to reflect what had transpired after Goat's defeat. The sky was much clearer than before, and the moon could be seen slowly plummeting from on high. My focus suddenly shifted towards a familiar character who was sitting on top of a small icy platform jutting up from the abyss that was beneath me. Bulk Biceps, who somehow survived plunging down below after falling asleep, was looking around in a daze, and I suspected that whatever had controlled him no longer had any kind of power.
I should probably change forms, shouldn't I?
I asked as I put the ocarina away and took out the Goron mask.
Remember that you stumble about when changing into a Goron. You might want to plant your feet into the snow before doing anything else.
Twilight answered.
You don't want to end up suffering the same fate that Maud experienced, right?
Her Highness didn't really need to say anything like that. I was well aware that my transformations weren't what one would call glamorous, but at least I had been doing it countless times until it had become second nature. Planting my feet into the snow to ensure that I wouldn't accidentally stumble into the abyss below, I put on the Goron mask and immediately started to flail about. With my feet in the snow, my stumbling was restricted, and upon screaming out loud I was surprised Bulk Biceps didn't hear me. What with his size I became Darmani again, lifted myself out of the snow, and walked forward where he immediately took notice of me.
Hey? Darmani? Is that you?
Bulk Biceps asked. I turned to look at him, making sure to be convincing.
Yes, it's me, Big Goron.
I answered. I also had to make sure to say the name he was known as in this world.
The elder told me that you would be coming this way in order to ask for permission to enter the temple. I waited for you to arrive, but then some stranger wearing a mask appeared, and the next thing I knew, I woke up at the bottom of this abyss.
Bulk Biceps said.
Do you know what kind of mask it was? It didn't look like anything I had ever seen before, but I felt a strange aura coming from the person wearing it. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that mask was evil in nature.
Bulk Biceps answered. If I had any doubts that Starlight Glimmer was behind what had transpired in these mountains, what Bulk Biceps just said washed away what doubt I had left. I didn't think that she could top what she did in Woodfall, but I had been proven wrong. Could she have done far worse in the remaining regions? My body shuddered at the mere thought of it. This now led me to a dilemma because of what Vice Principal Luna told me before my encounter with Ganondorf. She told me that I had to save Starlight, the one who had caused so much trouble, all because she was having fun pulling pranks. I didn't know if I could save someone who showed no disregard for those she wronged. A part of me wanted to leave her alone and let fate or some other force deal with her. On the other hand, what she was going through reminded me of myself. I too had abused a great power because of the desire to make my dreams come true. It also brought up another question: was Starlight in control? From personal experience, when you start to use a great power, you maintain control of it for only a short period of time, and then you become corrupted by it. When you become consumed, you lose all sense of self and become a mindless monster. From what I had observed so far, Starlight appeared to be in complete control of the mask on her face, but perhaps things weren't what they seemed. Was she being controlled by the mask itself? Forced to do its bidding? I had no solid proof of that, so it was nothing but a theory that held no merit. Bulk Biceps then interrupted my train of thought.
It's so strange, Darmani. I don't remember what I was doing from when that stranger came by to when I woke up down below. None of this makes any sense. I think she placed you under a spell. A spell?
Bulk Biceps exclaimed.
And here I thought this was going to be an easy job. Well, it's over now, I said. Whatever enchantment that person had over you is gone, so you can go back to guarding the temple. I also noticed that spring has returned to these mountains.
Bulk Biceps said. How had he come to that conclusion? This area of the mountains was still caked in snow as though nothing had changed.
It may be snowing up here, but I felt the warm breeze from below as I climbed my way back up. I don't know what you did, Darmani, but you have saved our people from freezing to death. No wonder you're loved by everyone in the village. You rose to the challenge and proved how great you are.
I blushed, making sure he didn't notice.
I did what I had to do. Anyway, the reason I came here is to return the stray fairies to their fountain.
Bulk Biceps' eyes almost popped out of his head when I said that.
Whaat. The great fairy of Snowhead was shattered? I didn't think anything could have done something like that. Maybe that is why the mountains fell into so much despair. Don't forget the guardian. The legendary giant? It was missing too.
Bulk Biceps asked. I nodded my head slowly.
How could such things happen? Like I said, it's over now. Is this a sign of things to come? Oh, I don't think I like this. Darmani, you should take those little ones back to where they belong so that the Great Fairy can watch over us once again.
Bulk Biceps then leaned forward to get a closer look at me.
Say. You look different, Darmani.
My heart began to pound quickly and my breathing came to a stop. Had he figured out that I wasn't really Maud? How could someone like him see through the magic whereas everyone else I've encountered couldn't?
Have you lost some weight since I last saw you?
My reaction almost made me fall over.
I needed to get in shape a little for my eventual trek up here. Guess you must have eaten too much rock sirloin last month, so now you had to go and work it off. You know, since spring has returned to these mountains, why not take part in the patriarch race?
Bulk Biceps asked.
I was planning on doing that.
Bulk Biceps laughed.
Everyone has been waiting so long what with the winter, but they should realize you're going to win easily. You are the fastest roller in the village after all. I heard the elder is hoping that you win the race. Any reason why? You should ask him. He's probably back in the village looking after everyone like he always does. I should let you get on, Darmani. You have a lot to take care of in the time that remains.
Bulk Biceps answered. He looked up at the moon and I didn't need for him to explain himself. There was roughly a day to go before the moon would destroy Termina, so I needed to hustle and get things done before resetting time again. Thanking Bulk Biceps for the conversation, I walked forward choosing wisely to walk across the narrow path rather than roll across. Even though it was much more peaceful than before, the temple itself was still a foreboding place that reminded me of what I experienced in my bid to rescue the second giant. I also realized that I was now halfway through with this journey. There were 4 giants and I had saved 2 of them. Once the other 2 were rescued, I could call them from their respective domains and they would do whatever it was they are supposed to do to prevent Termina from being destroyed. But, when this world is saved, how was I supposed to change it back to the way it was before? That was a question I had absolutely no idea of what to do. I mean, the last time I was in this kind of situation, it was Ganondorf not Tyrek but the real one who restored the world I called home back to normal when he saw it fit. I hoped that I wouldn't have to have him fix everything. It wouldn't be an easy task this time around if it were true. Her Highness then bopped me on the head, and I knew what she was going to ask me.
Sunset. I think it's time you told me about that mark on your hand. Yeah. No point in trying to hide it. How did you even get it? It happened on my last journey.
I answered.
After going through so many trials, I learned that I was chosen by destiny to possess the Triforce of Courage. The courage I displayed as I awakened those who could aid me to defeat Ganondorf was what led the golden power to dwell within my body. I didn't think much of it other than to play it out since it was a video game and all, but I learned that it wasn't just that.
Upon reaching the other side, I looked down at my hand before clenching it into a fist.
When the mark appeared on the back of my hand upon things changing back to normal, I was beside myself in shock. Did you tell our friends?
I shook my head.
I tried to tell them but they didn't listen. How could they believe something they don't remember? So you kept it to yourself?
I nodded.
I know I've changed a lot since those days, Twilight, but this was something that was beyond even my own understanding. But, I believed this was something I was burdened to do on my own. Sunset.
I looked at Her Highness and gulped. I had to tell her that she possibly had the Triforce of Wisdom inside of her. Ganondorf's words may have been cryptic in design, but I knew that he was talking about what happened to her in my previous journey. Her Highness was like me, a pony, and I unintentionally dragged her into a conflict that even I had troubled understanding the nuances behind it. Had she realized at some point that she possessed a piece of the golden power? Perhaps, but if not, then when would it be revealed? Just as I was about to tell her, I decided against it. Was I being a coward? No. Far from it, actually. Ganondorf said that my other was also bound to the same fate as I was. Could he have been referring to Twilight Sparkle, the human counterpart of Her Highness instead? Now things were really getting confusing. For now, it was best not letting her know that she could potentially possess the Triforce piece. I needed to be absolutely certain which of the two Twilights had it. Entering the fairy fountain, there were no monsters around, unlike before I walked forward until the pink shimmer that came from the pool could be seen. The stray fairies then began to leave my body to reunite with their fellow fairies, and Adagio Dazzle appeared in front of us once again. Like how the previous great fairy had a green tint to her, this one had a pink tint in that her hair was pink and she wore a beautiful pink gown. I still had trouble believing that Adagio, a siren, who along with her sisters tried to hypnotize all of Canterlot High into being their slaves just so they could be adored for eternity. Adagio then spoke.
Welcome Tattle, and you, kind young one. I am the great fairy of power. Thank you for returning my broken and shattered body to normal. You have been through a great deal to restore this land back to the way it was. So you knew about Darmani?
I asked.
She gave me her mission to complete. Whether you had taken up her request or decided to go about on your own, fate had decided that you were meant to destroy the evil creature that was responsible for the snow that almost blanketed this land forever. I knew that you would take up her gauntlet.
Adagio answered.
Do you know about the one who caused this winter? I do.
Adagio answered.
The forest imp who wears a cursed mask. Do you believe she will continue to maintain control of her power?
Adagio shook her head.
She believes that she can use the power of the mask to bring about destruction, but she does not realize that there is a darker force in play. I sensed it when she came to my fountain in her bid to shatter my body to pieces. I am not sure what this force is, but you must not allow her to succeed in her wicked ways.
Adagio looked up at the ceiling for a few moments before looking back at me again.
Young one, you must save not only this world from destruction, but the one who causes it. That's what the Guardian told me. Yes.
Adagio said.
The Guardian's words are most wise indeed.
She then smiled at me, which made me nervous.
Young one, I noticed that you have collected more masks than what you had when you visited my fellow Great Fairy. You have done well in collecting them, yet there are many more that await you. You may not fully understand the significance between them, but they will prove essential if you are to seek out the power that can rival what the forest imp possesses.
I was surprised by her words. Throughout this cycle of time, I had completely forgotten about why I was collecting masks. Did this version of Adagio know more than her previous self knew? I had to find out for certain.
What can you tell me about what I'm supposed to be getting? The mask that you seek was created to serve as a counterpart to the one the imp wears. However, its power was far too dangerous for mere mortals to possess, and so it was hidden away in shadows to prevent its misuse. It is said that whoever wears that mask will become a being whose very essence ebbs and flows with evil. The resulting form is a reflection of the darkness inside of the wearer's heart.
Adagio answered. It's an evil mask? That just made the situation not necessarily worse, but rather confusing. Why would another evil mask be needed to combat Majora's mask? Wouldn't it make more sense to use something more attuned to good instead? Was it really a good idea for me to seek out something that could potentially turn me back into the person I used to be before friendship entered my life? No. I can't go back there again after working so hard to earn everyone's trust. There had to be another way to stop Starlight, but what? 1. This was a mistake that a reader, Rattler20200, brought up. It originally said Nero but has been changed to the correct goddess, Far-Ro-Ray. End of chapter.